hit record and then I'll do. All right, perfect. So again, thank you everyone for coming tonight. I'm Betsy. I work in the reference department of the Traverse Area District Library. You can find all of our events at TADL.org/events. And also most of our programs like this one that are hybrid are also via Zoom. You can find on our YouTube channel, which is TADL or at TADL, Not Just Books. So thank you very much, Wade, for coming today. Tell us about your newest book, The Wishing Bridge. And everyone give a thumbs up. Have you read The Wishing Bridge? If you haven't, you definitely should. It's a great one. Even though the charm bracelet and recipe box were my absolute favorites, this one's really good too. So tell us a little bit more about that book for others who haven't read it yet.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm wearing an honor my Bronner's sweatshirt tonight. So I just feel like that's more than appropriate. And I've talked a little bit about this on tour. Yeah, just in brief, every book that I write's inspired by a deeply personal memory, and this was no different. You know, it was inspired by didn't grow up in Michigan. I grew up in the Missouri Ozarks, and my grandma Shipman, my pen name was seminal, and and raising me and helping me believe in myself and kind of loving me unconditionally and sheltering me from the ills of the world. If people saw the TV show Ozark, I always say they sugarcoated it because growing up in the 70s in rural Missouri was much rougher than that. But I have these incredible memories of my grandmother, especially at Christmas, and of being safe, and watching Charlie Brown Christmas with her, and those memories, I kind of recollected recently, recalled so much of what it was like to be young and to feel, for once in your life and one of the few times in your life, just safe. And that's how I felt at Christmas with her. And I love to tell everybody and remind them that she was working poor. She scrimped and saved. She never finished high school, learned to drive. She stitched overalls at a factory. And yet she made Christmas magical. You'd walk in her front door. She had a tiny little house, and you'd walk in her front door, and it was like she shoveled a path through all the presents so that you could make it to the TV and to her kitchen and to the fireplace. But I was recalling all of that, and just knowing how much my grandmother protected me, especially at the holidays, but also knowing that she was preparing me to leave. And what happens to us when we leave those we love, when we leave a safe environment. We aren't safe anymore. The people that we love age and begin to pass. The memories we have fade, or traditions begin to die off. And so that was kind of sitting in my heart. And I always have to have a setting for a book first. And there were two places in Michigan I'd never been before. And one was Mackinac Island, and the other was Frankenmuth. And you know how people tell you to go someplace, and you want to, but you think, oh my gosh, once I get there, it's going to suck. It's not going to be as great as they say it's going to be. And I went to Mackinac and loved it. I went to Frankenmuth and fell in love. As you can tell, went there, not only bought this sweatshirt, but blew my IRA on Christmas decorations, and fell in love with Frankenmuth. Started walking up and down Main Street, and ate at the chicken restaurants, and stuffed myself with taffy and fudge and egg noodles, and went to the glockenspiel, and watched it play the Pied Piper. And I knew when I left that I had the setting for this book that was kind of ruminating in my head. But it's about a woman in her 50s named Henrietta Wegner, who was born and raised in Frankenmuth, and her father dreamed of bringing to life the world's first Christmas store, much like this place, which inspired it. And what happens in a small town when you have a dream that's outside of the norm? People kind of thought he was cuckoo and off his rocker. And yet he grew it out of his parents' basement into something very large. And his dream was just to give it to his daughter one day. That would be his legacy. And she didn't want that. She was a little bit like me. She knew that she was going to have to leave. She had bigger dreams. She kind of saw from an early age how her life was planned out for the next 50 years. And she didn't want that. She didn't want her best friend to see every day, still dressed in a dirndl, dishing out fried chicken. She didn't want to marry her childhood sweetheart who worked at the woolen mill. She wanted something bigger. And so she set off and became a mergers and acquisitions executive in Detroit, Michigan, which we all know what that is. They cut companies down to the quick. And she's grown very used to the money and the benefits and the prestige, but she's grown very tired of what that job has done to her. And yet she hears from her young boss, there are so many people gunning for her, that she hears she's going to lose her job by the first of the year if she doesn't make a big deal. So she kind of out of desperation at the 1st of December says that she can convince her mom and dad, who are now in their 70s, to sell their Christmas business, which is now the largest independently owned Christmas store in the world, called Wegner's, which is very much like this place. So she goes home, you know, under a ruse. She's lying to her parents. She goes home at Christmas. They haven't seen her much over the past few years, and she's there pretending, but she's really there to convince them to sell their business. And she sees things in a very different light as she stays there through the holidays. And it's much like we do as adults. We see as children, we see our parents, we see our grandparents, we see our towns often in one way. As adults, we see it in a very different way. We start to understand the sacrifices our parents and grandparents made. We start to understand the charm maybe of a small town that offered community and comfort and safety when we don't have it any longer. And she starts to realize those things, much like I did as an adult. And it's a beautiful story. It's full of Frankenmuth, full of the magic and meaning of Christmas. And I always call my books ropes of hope, because I feel like in this day and age, no more than right now, we need comfort, we need safety, we need a hand to hold, we need something that makes us feel okay again. And I really wanted to reconnect readers back to those memories they had of their childhood and what mattered most. I've been telling everybody, we've been talking about Sears wish books. People under 30 don't know what the heck I'm talking about. Everybody else understands, but that was my world growing up, and I love kind of bringing people back to the heart of what the holidays mean. So I hope this book does that for them.
Yeah, for me it was a JC Penney book. I think we got the Sears too, but JC Penney was a little more prevalent. And so we would sit down and circle it. And that's what my grandma, she's like, circle what you want. And that's what she'd pick from. And I'd usually get like a white collared shirt or something. I'm like, why? It's not even what I circled. I was always bummed.
Yeah, we always had Sears, J.C. Penney, and Monkey Warts. What we called it, Monkey Warts, growing up. So it's my grandmother, I got a red pen, my brother got a green pen, and we would circle, so Santa would know whose was whose. And it just, it was just, I spent weeks going through that thing, and I circled probably hundreds of things and got maybe a half dozen, but it just was, I sound like my dad the older I get. Well, we've lost a little bit of that. There was a to me a more beautiful tradition to that, of actually thinking about what you were getting, or even me being an 80s guy, going out to the malls and picking things out and being in that holiday rush and touching the things. Everything's online now, and I understand the world's not going to go back and change, but there was a beauty to that that's, to me, kind of gone away.
Yeah, that's true. I just lost my train of thought. Oh, when I was reading the book, I like books that make you think, and usually lately I get really irritated, and if something starts to bug me in books, then I'm just putting it down and I won't even go back to it if it starts to drive me crazy. But I'm trying to get over that. It's like that whole impatience thing. And I knew that your book had a great ending, but it was pissing me off when I was reading it. I was so mad at the main character. I kept thinking, she doesn't see, she's just stuck in this mind of her goal. She doesn't want to lose her job and all that, and she wasn't seeing the bigger picture. And it was really making me mad throughout the whole thing. And I'm like, this can't end this way. It's got to be better. And I stuck with it. And It was really good. But what I like about books like that is that it's it's good discussion. It's not just, oh, it was such a sweet book and I love this and you felt good at the end, which you do, which is what I like. But there was more to it in there. There's a lot more grit that you could actually have a discussion with other people about and to see, you know, where she was going to go with it or where you were going with it actually.
A really good point. It's difficult for a reader, it's very difficult for an author to consciously decide to choose a character who readers may not like in the beginning. Um, it's very difficult, and I had a lot of discussions with my editor about that. Um, you know, how how do we keep her real and grounded in the real world without people disliking her too much? And yet, that is so much the way the world is. You know, we I talk to parents, grandparents every single day on tour, emails. Families don't live often in proximity to one another anymore. People can move and live anywhere. They People get busy. They have their own families. They have jobs that take so much time, or we get in this routine of making money or being so busy that we lose sight of what matters. Um, and that happens to people, and that happens to Henry in this book. Um, you know, I try to ground her in a few things. My grandma Shipman used to say, life is as short as one blank of God's eye, but we forget in that blank what matters most. And it's true, life goes like that. And one of the things in the book that I love reminding Henry is, I had a rescue dog named Mabel, who passed away last year, and she was the love of my life. And I bring her to life in this book, but I do it because it's a jarring memory to Henry when she returns home to see how old the dog is. How old she's become from that puppy she knew just a while back. And through that, she kind of sees her family, she sees her life, and that things have gone like that. Um, I also like pushing people out of environment. I like pushing them into a setting that makes them a little um, uneasy or knocks them off their rocker a little bit to kind of recalibrate them. And I think that does that to Henry in this book too. But yeah, it's interesting. More of my recent books have featured not so sugary women. I like to write about, if you've read any of my novels out there, I write about women usually 40 plus, 40 to 80, shocking, isn't it? That have been tested by life. And I love to write about that. Those are the people that fascinate me.
I think the other characters is what drew me in as well. That kept the story going, that you knew it was going to go somewhere. I love the one, I forget her name, the woman who helps her with the artist on the ornaments. Her,
Gertie.
yeah, her sense of humor was just hilarious. She just like told it like it was, and um kind of put Henry in her place a couple times, which was kind of nice. And then there's another woman, especially maybe it was the same one who told her she'd been eating too much and because she was bloated and whatever. It's just that kind of stuff. That happens, or does happen every
Oh,
day. People just blurt it out and say things. So it was just brought it to home. It was good. It kept me going in there. I actually listened to it on audio, which I can't put it down as well. If it's in audio, I don't press stop. I just listen to it in the car on my commute to work. But did you have much say with the narrator? I did love the narrator. So
yeah, I do. I had not had any. I'm currently with HarperCollins, and previously with my former publisher, I'd had zero input on who the narrator was. And the one you listened to, her name is Nancy Peterson, and she's actually done my previous, I think, 3 or 4 audiobooks. And I got to choose her many, many moons ago, and I love her so much. Um, I think she gets Michigan just right. Uh, that some of my earlier books, there was previous narrators that were a little too hard, a little too Wisconsin-y, or maybe a little too Canadian. And I'm like, you ain't getting this right. So there's a fine point. I love her. I think she's terrific. And I think she brings incredible emotion to it. And I think she's just a wonderful narrator. So yeah, I've been very lucky to have input into that the last few times. I have to say, like you said, I love secondary characters in books. I work very hard on making them as realistic as the main character. And the Wishing Bridge is filled with, Gertie, the 90-year-old woman that you've been to Bronner's. They have the personalized painting department where they do the ornaments. Well, she's been heading it up for 30 years, and she holds no prisoners. She says what's on her mind, and she's hilarious. I loved her so much. We have a new rescue dog. We named her Gertie, which means strong as a spear. So it's kind of fitting. And I love Henry's best friend Sophie, who dishes egg noodles as much as she does one-liners. That's kind of like any of our BFFs out there, that tells it to you straight, that becomes our mirror, and really sees through the bowl and lets you know exactly what's going on. And I really love secondary characters because they're not secondary. If you look at our lives, parents, grandparents, best friends, co-workers, they're truly our everyday existence. So I feel like they should be front and center in every book I write.
Exactly. Do you have a plan? Someone else asked me this earlier. Do you have a plan to write a book uh, or put out a book that mentions or that shows a map and mentions all your spots in Michigan from all your books?
I do.
So someone could do a tour.
Ironically, there was a fellow library in Michigan that, when I was on tour this winter, did one. So I'm going to be using that. We're going to take it and they're going to actually update it for me. So it shows Michigan, but then puts every book with the location so that people can kind of visit. And I'll have that on my website this coming year. So yeah, it's cute. It was a very cute idea. And I'm like, why didn't I think of that?
It is. That would be great. And I thought about that too. I'm like, oh, that is perfect. I'm going to have to ask him about that tonight. Um, you are going to come back and see us in person next summer sometime. We haven't figured that out yet, but do you what book are you working on right now?
I just turned in my next book. It's with my editor and agent, and I haven't gotten a lot of feedback yet, but it's titled The Page Turner, and it's a little bit different. I always say it's very Viola, but it's a touch different, in the main character's a bit younger, and I'm taking a hard look at publishing, essentially. It takes place in South Haven, Michigan, and it's about a young woman that's a recent University of Michigan graduate who wants to be a writer, much like I did growing up. And she's dreamed of writing romance, and her parents, which she grew up reading with her grandmother on the beach in South Haven, and her parents think that is absolutely horrific. They are elitist, snobby, literary, I won't say the word I'm thinking, that have an independent publishing house in New York, and they consider it very lowbrow. And she ends up finding a hidden manuscript in her grandmother's cottage that turns the family upside down. And it's a beautiful book about those of us that simply love to read, and how difficult it is for writers today to get published. Publishing has gone like this as a world to this as a world. There are fewer opportunities for young writers, for women, for writers of color to be published. Those options are narrowing every day. And there are fewer books getting more attention every single week that kind of um, suck the oxygen out of the room for other writers. And I'm taking a look at that and asking hard questions about that. And, why I write what I consider to be commercial fiction. I write books that are accessible to readers. I intentionally write books that are accessible to readers. And yet there is in literary critical circles in publishing an ability to put that at a lower notch than other fiction. And I've been telling folks on tour this too. It's like when women write fiction, and I am part of that group, our novels are classified as women's fiction or chick lit or rom-com or romance, and men write fiction that is classified as literature. And there is a real double standard that's going on that no one addresses or looks at. And I'm looking at it all in this book. So it's, I'm taking on some deeper topics, I think. And my editor was very excited about the book. I said a couple of weeks ago, she had read the first 4 chapters and texted me and said, I love it so far, because the main character is a little bit edgy too. She does not, she knows her parents love her. She doesn't, not so sure that they like her too much. And it's an awful place to be in this world. So I basically told my editor, I'm like, you haven't gotten very far, so just let me know what you think as it rolls along. But I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited about it.
Who are your favorite authors? Who do you draw inspiration from? I know most of your writing is from not really personal, but from some experiences. But who do you read that, like, honestly, your stuff reminds me a little bit of Ellen Hildebrand and a couple Nantucket authors like that, Nancy Thayer even and stuff. But I mean, who do you like to read when you go and pick out a book? What do you like?
Well, the dogs agree with me. Yeah, you just listed 2 of my favorites. Nancy Thayer and Ellen Hildebrand are 2 of my favorites. Years past, Pat Conroy, Dorothea Benton Frank were 2 of my favorite Southern authors. I've always loved setting. I've always loved a place that breathes as much as the characters do. So they've always been influential to me. I started my career as a memoirist, so I still love to read nonfiction. I love Anne Lamott. I love David Sedaris. I was born and raised on Irma Bombeck. So I still read a lot of humor too, because I feel like I try to use humor in my work too to kind of balance out. I always think it lifts you out of the tough stuff. So I really try to do that. I'll read a lot of authors now for work. There's an author named Jamie Brenner who has a brand new summer novel coming out. I'm reading it right now. So a lot of it's for endorsements for future books. Pamela Kelly is another one. I've got one of her books that I'm reading that'll be out next summer. So it kind of covers the gamut. Eric Larson, I love. Richard Paul Evans, I love. Lessons in Chemistry, I finally just read and loved. I mean, how long did that take me?
That took me a really long time to read and get into, and I'm not sure if I liked it. Again, another character that I was really mad at throughout almost the entire book.
Yeah.
Someone mentioned, and I wanted to see. Oh yeah, I was going to say this too, that a lot of your books are the perfect Hallmark holiday book. And she said, don't take offense to it, but she could visualize it and have it a good Hallmark story. Have you had any inspiration or aspire to have them be movies at all?
Yeah, by the way, the Hallmark, I actually talked about that on tour. Hallmark, if you're writing a Christmas book, Hallmark has wrecked and saved the holiday storyline. Because when I kind of synopsized to my editor and agent, the publishing team, what I wanted to write about, my agent said, that sounds very Hallmark. And I said, yes, but, and that's when I said I wanted to write, about some deeper themes. You know, this is about a woman that makes bad decisions. You know, it's about a woman that's lost people that she's loved. Um, it's a woman where timing, like in so many of our lives, just bad timing. Timing's been off. Um, like it is for so many of us, has taken her life in a very different course. So I wanted to write about, as I do in all of my winter books, just not happy-go-lucky holiday Hallmark stories, because that is not what the holidays are for many people. You know, we have loneliness, we have loss, um, we have memories that haunt us. Sometimes we don't want to put up the tree. Sometimes we aren't going to make the snickerdoodles because there's a bad memory associated with it. You know, not everybody's at the table. So that's, you know, I know in a Christmas story you have to give certain storylines to people, settings and vibes and feels, but sometimes I really like to dig deeper. And yes, I keep saying I haven't announced this yet, but I can say this, but it's not announced, so nobody go online and say anything yet. But it's the writers' strike just ended a couple of weeks ago, and I just signed my first contract to have one of my books turned into a movie, and it's actually the one that's set in your backyard. The Secret of Snow is being produced into a movie. It's got a very good producing team. It's being produced by a group called Happy Accidents, which is producing a Netflix show called Jenny in Georgia, which is very popular right now. So unsure of if it's going to be right now, if it'll be a movie or a series, but it'll probably be a kind of a holiday movie. Um, the script is completed and done. It's going to be cast very soon, and we think it's going to start filming this coming winter.
Wow, that is exciting.
So yeah, this is set in Traverse and Palm Springs, where I am right now. So it's got both dual settings, and you know, it's about a meteorologist in her 50s who is going to get replaced by an AI weather woman, which, as we all know, is happening these days. And she has a meltdown and goes to a Rat Pack bar and gets very, very drunk and ends up returning to the station against better judgment, and goes on air and lets people know exactly what's going on and what she thinks. And she gets fired, and the only place that will hire her back is a tiny little station in Traverse City run by a former frenemy of hers, that basically wants to torture her for having lived in the sun for so many years. And she puts her to task doing all of the winter activities throughout northern Michigan, you know, cardboard sledding and you know, the Yeti Fest in Sutton's Bay. So she has to do all of those things, and but it's really, she's run away her whole life, and it's based a lot on my own life. I lost my brother when I was young, and this is about a woman that lost her sister at the holidays at an early age, and just has never been able to deal. So she's run her whole life, and she comes back and lives with her mother, which is my mother in real life. You know, a hospice nurse that lets you know exactly what it is in life, you know, just says it as it is. And it's a beautiful, it's actually one of my favorite books. And so I'm very excited. It's a good team, and they're keeping the characters as is, you know, 50s and late 70s, which was my big thing. You know, don't make them 20 and 40. Keep them as is. And they're doing that.
So did you have a say in the script? You were able to look it over and
I had to say in initially what I just said. You know, are you gonna, as I said, are you gonna jack with the characters? Are you gonna, because I've turned down stuff in the past. The Charm Bracelet was optioned to be a movie, and they wanted to remove the grandmother in it. You know, read that book, the grandmother is the central character, and I said no to that. So yes, I have not seen the full script. I've seen the outline of it and what their intentions are, and I'm very pleased with what they've done.
that's fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah, very excited. So hopefully a year from now, we'll be looking toward that.
Great. I've noticed, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think that all of your nonfiction memoirs and and such are written under Wade Rouse, and then
Yeah,
all of your fiction is Viola. Is that correct?
correct.
Nice. What do you, my assumption, and I'm not a writer, is that you probably like writing both. They both have different aspects that, pluses and minuses, both of them. But what do you find that's easier to write?
It's reversed. I started my career writing nonfiction, and it was what I knew. I grew up reading mostly, as I said, like Irma Bombeck. I was an essay writer. I became a magazine writer. Long form journalism was what I really loved to do. And when I started writing my first book, and the book that I wanted to write, it was called America's Boy, and it was about growing up gay in the Missouri Ozarks, in the 1970s with a family that loved me but had zero idea what to do with me at that time. It's not easy to grow up in rural America and want to be a writer and love books. It didn't set well with people. So that was the book that always called to me, and the only way I knew to write it was in my own voice, just short pieces of my life that impacted me so deeply. And I didn't know what would ever happen with that book, but I got an agent very quickly, and she was able to sell that in about a week to Random House at the time. Yeah, or Penguin, excuse me, before they merged, and it was published the next year. So that is what I knew. I wrote 4 memoirs before I ever started writing Viola Shipman novels. And my first novel I wrote, The Charm Bracelet, took me 3 years and was not easy at all. It's a completely different game. The structure's different. How I approach writing it is different. In memoir, I knew myself. I knew my voice. I knew the people I was writing about. Fiction, it's all coming from nothing. Um, but I approach memoir, I call it puzzle piecing it together. I just really start writing snippets of my life and then forming them together into a larger story. Um, Fiction is very different. I approach it in a very linear fashion, going usually from the beginning to the end, doing a lot of character outlines, but kind of foundationally, they're all the same. I start with a big question that I want answered, that I think all of you are wrestling with, that maybe you want answered too, and that's kind of what guides me. But I think writing memoir made me a good fiction writer. And I think the more I've written fiction, the more that's made me. I think Magic Season is personally, I feel it's my best memoir. I've become more sparse and in my descriptions. I've become, I think, richer in writing about setting, which comes from me having written so many novels. And I think my writing that memoir made me a much better fiction writer too. I think my dialogue is much better. Um, I think I know how to end scenes in a much more compelling and realistic way. Um, so I feel like they kind of both groove together. And I'm hoping to write another memoir here in the next couple of years too.
Well, it's definitely paid off since Magic Season is a Michigan notable book. We do carry it at the library, which I was excited to see. I put a hold on it, so hopefully I'll get it before anyone else. Don't rush and put your name on it, please. Um, I I'm watching some of the people who are on camera and yourself. I saw your little puppy go by behind you, and I see people's cats. And I know I've asked you this question before, but we'll say it to everyone else. If you were to be an animal, what kind of animal would you be?
Oh, dog, totally. I grew up, my mother was the nurse in our little town, and she's kind of like our Florence Nightingale, and people truly, we lived on like 8 acres kind of outside of our little tiny town, and people dumped their animals on our property, because they knew my mother would, as she did, take them in, tend to them if they needed care, get them spayed or neutered, find homes for them. But those pets growing up for me, those animals became my pets. We had ton of feral cats that my mother cared for that lived outside, but would just kind of round up every evening for dinner. Never get too close except for my mom. Um, all of the dogs I had growing up were all rescues. I had a one-eyed beagle that had somehow lost its eye, came to us, sorry to gross people out, but with like just an orb hanging out that my mother saved. She saved its life, and he became one of my best friends growing up. So I'm such I love cats. I know people that have birds. I know people that have lizards. I'm such a dog person, though. I have two rescues right now, Gertie and Doris, and I'm in tune with them. I think largely because I can't write a book without an animal on my feet.
That's for sure. I'm a dog person too. We have a eight, I think it's December, so he's 8 months, eight
Ah,
month old
baby.
Newfoundland. Yeah,
Oh,
he's a
oh,
Newfoundland.
oh, you'll be able to ride him to work next year.
Oh yeah, he's a character. This is our third one, and each one has completely different personalities. It's
Ah,
just amazing. Right now he's a butthole, but it's okay. He'll get
baby
there.
still.
Yeah, he's still, that's what I got to keep reminding myself. Even though he looks full grown, he's so not. He's just a puppy. Um, I wanted to let everyone know too that we have a blog at the library called Fine Print, and we did interview Mr. Rouse. So I wanted to share that just so everyone could see it. But let's see if I know how to share a screen. I probably don't.
It was a fun interview.
Yeah. So there's Fine Print, and then we go to 3 to 5 questions where we talk to a bunch of authors, and there's Wade right there. So you can read all about him and other people, which is kind of fun. Although I think unknowingly, even though I just look back on it, I unknowingly probably asked every question except for the Dewey number, but that's okay. They can read about that.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
You have good questions. Those were very good questions. I do a lot of online interviews and Q&As, and those were cute questions.
Well, it's funny what especially writers come back with, what they think. And it's usually completely opposite of what I think too.
Yeah,
I just know them reading their book. So that's kind of nice. So you have one book that you just turned in. What do you have any, and besides wanting to write a memoir pretty soon again, do you have another one that you're in the mix, another Michigan, I would imagine?
I do. Yeah, I have about, I would say, 10 finely tuned proposals that all of which I would like to write. Some are summer, some are winter holiday, some are could be any time. Some are different than what I've been writing. Some are very in the same vein. And I'm actually up this. The book I just turned in was actually my last book in my contract with my current publisher. So we're waiting to see what happens here in the coming year. But yeah, I'm sure that they're going to re-up for more books. But I've got a number that I would like to write. A few that are calling to me, as well as a memoir. So I'm very excited to get back to it. I get very antsy if I'm not working on anything. So I will be working on something, and I'm going to be doing. I hate to say the A word, but I'm going to be doing an Amazon Originals as well. I don't know if folks are familiar with those, but they're very popular right now. They're basically novellas that authors are doing um, that Amazon produces and promotes. And they're typically for authors that is a little conduit between books to keep readers interested and going. So then that's something I'm going to immediately be working on come January. And I have a great premise for that.
Oh, that's fun. Someone just said no.
I know, I'm sorry.
And those are hard too, because especially I just remember James Patterson came out with some book shots a while ago, the same kind of thing, but they're small little tiny paperbacks, just these
Yeah.
skinny little things, and people would get so mad because the library didn't carry them. Well, those tiny little paperbacks don't last in a library. So it's like really, you get one or two checkouts and they're gone. So it's
Yeah,
not a very good use of taxpayer dollars to
yeah.
spend money on something like that. It's people would get so upset with us. But you know what? There's now with ebooks being so out there and everyone's that's so much easier.
That's exactly it. It's probably be an audiobook as a way for them to kind of cost effectively promote. But it's a story I wanted to write, and it's a nice. I don't like to go too long without readers having something in their hands. So it's I think it's a kind of a nice string.
Yeah, exactly. And especially those ones are so much easier to put like Wendy's saying on Hoopla or Libby and Overdrive.
Yeah.
It's I mean, it's just a lot easier and then we don't have to keep purchasing over and over again. I just had a thought. Oh, so someone else asked, what advice would you give to a first time writer? If anyone has any questions, please, write it out, or even you can unmute yourself and ask as well if you'd like to.
How long do you have? Number one, and I very seriously is listen to your voice. I always say writers use the same linguistic tool belt. We're not inventing words or a new language. We use the same words and we tell often the same stories, truly. But it's how you bring that to life that makes a difference. And that's hard to do because we, we trick ourselves up here. I always say bad things happen from here to here because we are so fearful in this world. We're so, we're so taught in life to be scared. And you have to unlearn fear. There's a thing called Substack. I'm actually starting a new Substack called Unlearning Fear to kind of help emerging writers through this. I'm too busy to do writing workshops, so I'm going to start putting all of my lessons actually on this. It's like $5 like every couple of months or something. It's actually way cheaper than doing one of my workshops that you can sign up for. And it's truly, I'm going to walk people how to get a book published, how I help writers do that. But number one is listening to your voice, tell that story that calls to you. Stop listening to people. I always wanted to be a writer. I was always told I could never be a writer because no one was. We're not good in this world and doing things that aren't normal or sensible. My dad was a chemical engineer, and I told him when I was majoring in communications in college, he said, we all communicate, son, but nobody gets paid a cent for doing that. So you start to trick yourself into thinking you're not worthy of writing or painting or creating whatever you want to do. It could be your own business. And when you finally do and you sit down to write, you've got a story here and here, and you start to write it and you think, oh my gosh, this is going to suck. No one's ever going to read this. I better get dinner on the table for the family. I need to get my kids to soccer practice. I have a real job that pays me. Better work on that. I got to mow the yard. And so you stop before you ever start. Um, you have to unlearn all of that. You have to stop listening to people that say it's never going to happen, or you're not good enough, or your story doesn't mean anything. You have to stop listening to that. You have to unlearn all of that fear that stops you from putting your heart on paper. And we're victims of that. And when I say we have this voice, we lose it because we just want to fit in this world. We want to be liked. We want everything to be okay. We want to take the easy, safe route. And when we do that, we lose that uniqueness, what makes us us. And that's the only thing that we have that we can give to the world. It's just who we are. But you have to find that again because that gets lost in this world. It goes away. And it's difficult to find. I was 40 when my first book was published. I had to unlearn and learn a lot. The biggest thing was I had to learn to love myself again. And once you find that, and I know I sound Pollyanna, I sound like a dime store philosopher, dominoes fall in this world, and great things happen because of that. But I had to risk everything truly to find that. Um, but it's possible for people. I always tell emerging writers, starting writers, aspiring writers, I grew up in the Ozarks. I didn't know anybody. I used to believe there was this golden key that they gave in New York City to authors, that you would get if you were Stephen King or James Patterson or somebody that would unlock that door. And it's not, the only person that unlocks the door is you. You already own the key. You just have to find it. It's hard to find.
Thank you. Along those, there's a couple comments, and one says, Mindy says, "You are so inspiring," which you absolutely are. You seem to talk from your heart, and that's inspiring for sure. Along the same vein, can you talk a little bit about how you do the research for your fiction book? Because Mary, who asked this question, says she always fact checks your historical references for Michigan, and they're always correct.
Yeah, thank you.
She's learned a lot about Michigan history.
I do. It's interesting. I used to kind of short shrift myself. I used to think I was not a good researcher because I really admire writers like Eric Larson who aren't just great writers, but they are so detailed. The the facts seem like fiction. They're so good. And I never believed myself to be like that. But I do, I not to pat myself on the back, I do a lot of research about Michigan history, about the settings. When I use a setting, I'm not just visiting the setting and saying, "Ooh, that's fun," or pretty. I am a former journalist, so I walk the streets and I talk to people and interview them. And what do you like about Frankenmuth or Traverse City? What do you hate? What are the traditions here? What would it be like if I moved here? Where should I go? What's the one place tourists go? What's the place that locals go? What's the closest bar I can go to have a drink and get a couple drinks and people, and then they'll tell me the truth. That's a lot of what I do, but I spend a lot of time doing research. I don't write historical fiction, but I do write historical fiction. It's within our memory, and that's what really gets me excited to write about. But it takes a lot of time, and it was not easy in the beginning because my research as my agent used to say in first drafts of my first novel was a little bit like the ottoman in the living room that Dick Van Dyke tripped over. A little too obvious. I was like that school kid that go, "I did research, I'm real smart, look at it." You have to do it and then seamlessly try to weave it in so it makes sense with the storyline.
I love that. I was um had a break today, although I'll say I had a break today when I was at work because my director is on here listening as well. I was looking through Facebook and I was looking at your page, or things that you were tagged in, and someone had said they mentioned about there's no way that Michigan, the Great Lakes, are that blue. And then someone, I think you maybe or someone, sent pictures and showed all these pictures of Lake Michigan and the sand dunes and things like that. And then she said, "Okay." So then she booked her trip to Michigan or something like that for a vacation. I thought that was pretty cool.
True. Yeah, I remember ever since I wrote The Clover Girls, which is set in kind of the Glen Arbor area. And I was writing about it, and I'm not exaggerating. I would get emails from readers that had never been to Michigan or knew nothing about this state and would say or only just thought of Detroit, and they would say there's no what that where did you either one, you photoshopped the image, or two, you stole that from Greece or the Amalfi Coast and are saying it's Michigan. And I was like, "No, honey, we're not playing this game." So I can write a lot about it, but I did a number of posts a few years back where I'm just like, here is a real picture from, or here's a picture I just took of Torch Lake, or my sunset from my friend's house at Sutton's Bay, because people didn't buy it because it's a lot prettier than, you know, some of the places, even though they live on the coast and by the ocean, it's a lot prettier than that. So I had to make believers out of them.
Is there one book that you can't live without that you like to read over and over again that is your absolute favorite?
Yeah, you know, I try to revisit some classics every couple of years, just to, especially ones that maybe I read when I was younger, to see if they resonate in the same way. And one is a writing guide that I love. It's Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. I read that um, usually every couple of years, and it's kind of like Stephen King's on writing. It's really about writing, but it's really about life. Um, it's one of the best kind of spiritually creative guides. And I do read that a lot. Do you know, I've read Catcher in the Rye 3 times in the last 5 years. And I don't know why. I reread it to see if I would like it more than I did when I was younger. And I did. For as an adult, I did for some reason, because I got it more because he was a little bit like me as an adult. I was like, oh, I get it. The world's really, pardon my language, full of crap. So many people are just such, you know, in this age of Instagram and TikTok. And you look at these holiday videos people put out right now where everything is perfection. And people watching them don't realize that they just put $2,000 and about 100 hours of taping and had a professional editor edit it. It's not real. And so for some reason, with that context, you know, that really has resonated with me again. And yeah, there's a number that I will reread, some for pleasure, some for fun. Um, I reread recently The Christmas Box by Richard Paul Evans, which is one of kind of my first adult Christmas books that I purchased. I read The Christmas Pearl by Dottie Frank again, which is one of my favorite holiday books. So yeah, I do. I revisit a lot.
Sorry about the silence there. I'm just trying to think of something. I feel like I've read a bunch of your interviews and I've seen you a couple times that I don't want to ask all the same questions that everyone else does. But if anyone has any other questions, please feel free.
Question.
Yes, thank
Hi,
you.
Wade. When you did your research at Bronner's, how much of behind the magic and the scenes did you get to? Did they take you all on a tour behind all of that, where all the magic happens, the electrical wiring? I mean, that place is lit up. I just wondered how much they actually allowed you behind the scenes, and how much time you spent there kind of seeing the magic behind the curtain.
They gave me a baby tour. You know, I think probably in the beginning they thought they were a little skeptical, like, who's this crazy person asking to see, you know, is he stealing secrets or whatever. And ironically, there was a woman that came to one of my events who worked in customer service at Bronner's, that actually heard that there was an author that was there looking around and then reached out to me. So she ended up becoming a real conduit for me, and, you know, provide answering questions and somebody that I could go to, and, you know, just, you know, what time do they turn off the lights, and, you know, all just silly questions as I had. But that is tend to what I do, and I think a lot of writers do. They find someone that is very knowledgeable about a place, and then will supply them with information. And she's been great. She actually came to my event in Fenton, Michigan, my launch event. So it was kind of cool that she was there and
That's cool.
got to be kind of full circle.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions at all? This is your chance. You get him all to yourself right now. Well, for the most part, we know what's coming up. I absolutely love books that become into movies. We do a program, and we have for many years now. I think we showed almost 400 movies, that books to movies program, which is fantastic and a lot of fun. So maybe yours will get into it'd be a movie and not a series, even though I love series too. Then we can show that in a couple of years. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, I love movies. I love a series because I've heard that we get paid more, so that's lovely. But we'll see about that.
Yeah, that would be good. But really, I just want to say thank you for coming, and it's so nice to meet you. Oh, does have a question. I want to get through all of them for sure. After Mackinac Island, what other area are you going to try to write about? Have you been to Mackinac yet?
Yes, Mackinac is definitely on the list, but we're waiting for a certain timing to happen for that book. I have a great idea for the book. I've actually started writing a little bit of it way in advance, but um, it really, I think, is meant to be at a certain year. God, you all are like, what? But yeah, so we're waiting for that. Yeah, I want to go further into the UP, which we're planning to do this summer since I don't have a book out. Um, Copper Harbor is one area that I've been told I must go to. I must research. I must spend some time in. So that's on the list. The Thumb area of Michigan is another area which I've been told I need to get over to and spend some time. So this summer will be spent doing some traveling and some research for settings.
Yeah, I can think of a lot of things up in UP, definitely that you'd
Yeah.
fit right into to write about for sure. And the food, there's another food angle, the pasties up there. So
Yeah, very much so.
well, thank you so much for coming, and I wish you and Gary wonderful holiday season.
Thank
Um,
you.
and that's it. I'm like awestruck. I don't have anything else to say because I just don't know what to say.
Thank you for having me. Hopefully we can make the summer work and we can see everybody in person. And yeah, I hope everybody loves the Wishing Bridge. And we've got some fun stuff coming up in 24. Yeah, so if you're interested in writing, I'll be posting on the Viola Shipman page kind of how you can sign up and kind of join along with that. And I'm doing literally like 50 writers lessons that'll be part of that. And I'm also going to be sharing an unpublished memoir that my agent could not get published and doesn't think she will be able to get published. So I'm actually going to, chapter at a time, bring it to life, I think, on this kind of this new Substack writing blog, and then talk about it. Talk about chapter to chapter why I'm writing it the way I am, to help writers kind of see chronologically how things work. So I'm hoping it'll be a great guide for folks. And yeah, we're doing a lot of tours to Michigan through our Viola Shipman. We have Smitten with the Mitten tours. So we're going to bring those to life. We're doing one in Palm Springs, actually, to celebrate the Secret of Snow in March, and a lot of other fun stuff too.
Are you in Palm Springs for the winter?
Yeah, in the winter until probably April-ish.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so very much. I will keep an eye out on everything, and I'll definitely keep in touch with you.
Thank you. Happy holidays and happy reading, everybody.